The bell above the door of Miller's diner jingled as it always did, letting in a gust of warm air mixed with chatter and the smell of coffee. It was a place where truckers stopped for a quick meal, families gathered on Sunday mornings, and the same handful of retirees claimed their corner booth each day to trade stories. On the surface, it was an ordinary American diner. Chrome stools at the counter, laminated menus, and a jukebox in the corner that hadn't worked in years. For Eli Turner, a 17-year-old working part-time as a waiter, the diner was more than just a job. It was a way to help his mother keep the lights on at home, to save for college, and to prove to himself that he could shoulder responsibility. Eli was lean, with sleeves rolled up past his elbows and a nervous determination in his step. Though tired from balancing school and work, he greeted every customer with the same polite, hopeful smile. That Saturday afternoon started like any other. Eli rushed between tables carrying trays of burgers and fries, refilling coffee cups, and wiping down the sticky booths with practiced efficiency. The regulars gave him nods of approval, often slipping him a kind word or a little extra tip when they saw how hard he hustled. But when the door opened and Officer Dalton Briggs stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. Dalton was a man who filled a room not with charm but with arrogance. His uniform, though neatly pressed, carried an air of intimidation more than service. He was known around town for his temper, and for the way he seemed to relish reminding others of his authority. He slid into a booth with a swagger, removing his cap and tossing it carelessly onto the table. The conversations in the diner dulled for a moment before slowly resuming. People noticed him, they always did, but they pretended not to. It was easier that way. Eli approached with his notepad in hand, steadying his voice as he asked, "Good afternoon, sir. What can I get you today?" Dalton glanced up, his eyes narrowing as he studied the boy. He smirked, already deciding to make him a target. "Coffee, black, and make it quick. Don't keep a man like me waiting." "Yes, sir," Eli replied, scribbling the order before hurrying toward the counter. His hands trembled slightly, though he forced himself to breathe. He had learned quickly that some customers demanded more patience than others. Still, there was something unsettling about Dalton's stare, a kind of simmering hostility that didn't need a reason to ignite. As Eli returned with the steaming mug, placing it gently on the table, Dalton leaned back, arms crossed. "Tell me, kid," he drawled, his tone heavy with mockery. "Do they let just anyone work here now?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Eli swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. Around them, a few patrons glanced over, sensing the shift. The tension had started. And Eli, though he didn't yet know it, was about to become the center of a storm that would shake the entire town. Eli forced a polite smile as he set Dalton's mug on the table, but the officer's smirk widened, feeding on the boy's nervous energy. Dalton took a slow sip of coffee, grimacing as though it were beneath him. He slammed the cup down harder than necessary, the clatter making Eli flinch. "Too hot," Dalton sneered, waving the steam away dramatically. "What's the matter, kid? Don't know how to pour a proper cup of joe." A ripple of unease spread through the diner. Conversation stalled as people turned their heads, pretending not to listen yet unable to ignore the sharpness in Dalton's voice. Eli swallowed and tried again. "I'm sorry, sir. I can get you a fresh one if you'd like." Dalton leaned back in the booth, folding his arms, his lips curling in a taunt. "You're sorry? That's it? Kid, where I come from, sorry doesn't cut it. People like you need to learn how to serve with respect." The words dripped with venom. Eli clenched his notepad tighter, but he refused to let his composure break. "I'll fix it right away," he said softly, turning toward the counter. But Dalton wasn't done. He grabbed the glass of water sitting on the table, condensation dripping down its side. "Hold up," he barked. "Maybe you should cool off first." Before Eli could react, the officer tipped the glass forward. The water cascaded down the front of Eli's shirt, soaking through the thin fabric, trickling onto the floor. Gasps erupted around the diner. Silverware clinked as hands froze mid-meal, eyes widening in disbelief. Dalton chuckled, leaning back as if he'd just performed a harmless prank. "There," he said mockingly. "Now you're refreshed. Might help you focus." Eli stood frozen, his chest heaving, droplets of water sliding down his arms. The humiliation burned hotter than any spilled coffee could. His ears rang with the sound of stifled laughter from a corner booth, though most patrons sat in stunned silence. The manager, a kind but cautious man named Mr. Jennings, stepped out from behind the counter, his face pale. "Officer Briggs," he said carefully. "That's enough. The boy's just doing his job." Dalton shot him a glare sharp enough to slice through steel. "You telling me how to handle my business, Jennings? Maybe I should take a look at whether your little diner's meeting regulations." Jennings faltered, retreating a step. Dalton smirked again, victorious in his intimidation. Eli, meanwhile, forced himself to stand tall, though his shirt clung to him uncomfortably. He met Dalton's gaze for the first time, his voice trembling but clear. "You didn't need to do that, sir." The officer snorted, unimpressed. "Didn't need to? Kid, the world's tougher than you think. Better you learn that lesson now." Unbeknownst to Dalton, a teenage girl in the back booth had pulled out her phone. Her hands shook as she recorded, her camera catching every second. The sneer, the splash of water, the boy's silent humiliation. In that moment, Dalton thought he had asserted his dominance. But what he had really done was dig the grave of his own authority. The town, and soon the world, was about to see who he truly was. For a long moment after the water hit the boy's shirt, the diner stayed frozen in silence. The only sounds were the slow drip of liquid onto the floor and Dalton Briggs's smug laughter echoing against the tiled walls. Eli stood motionless, fighting the urge to break down in front of strangers. But in the corner booth, Lena Morales, a high school senior with sharp instincts, kept her phone camera trained on the scene. She whispered to her friend beside her, "People need to see this." The video captured every detail. The cruel tilt of Dalton's hand, the shock on Eli's face, the cowardly stillness of onlookers. Once Dalton finally tossed a few crumpled bills onto the table and swaggered out of the diner, the tension released like a snapped wire. People rushed to Eli's side with napkins, pats on the back, murmurs of sympathy. Jennings, the manager, muttered apologies, but fear still lined his face. Fear of retaliation if he pushed the officer too hard. Meanwhile, Lena uploaded the clip to social media. Within an hour, it had already gained traction. By evening, the video was exploding across timelines with captions like, "Cop bullies teenage waiter," and "Abusive power caught on camera." The comments section flooded with outrage. "Fire him immediately. This man represents law enforcement? That poor kid handled it with more dignity than the cop ever could." By the time Dalton sat down at his dinner table that night, his phone was buzzing nonstop. At first, he smirked, expecting praise or routine messages. But when he finally glanced at the screen, his expression shifted. Dozens of notifications. His name trending. A video thumbnail showing him mid-sneer, arm extended, glass tilted. "What the hell?" he muttered, scrolling through furious posts, his face paling with every new share. His wife stood in the doorway, her voice trembling. "Dalton, what did you do?" The next morning, reporters gathered outside the precinct. Camera crews shoved microphones toward the chief, demanding answers. The chief, stone-faced, confirmed that the officer in question had been identified and placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Inside the station, fellow officers kept their distance. Some shook their heads in disgust. Others muttered that he had finally crossed the line. Riley, a younger officer, said bluntly, "You humiliated a kid for no reason, and now you've humiliated all of us." Dalton bristled, his pride cracking under the weight of public scorn. "It was nothing, just teaching the boy respect." "Respect?" Riley shot back. "You don't earn respect by pouring water on a teenager. You destroyed it." Meanwhile, Eli walked into school the next day to whispers of a different kind. His classmates greeted him with nods, pats on the shoulder, and even applause. The video had turned him from an unnoticed kid working part-time into a quiet symbol of resilience. He didn't feel like a hero. He still felt the sting of humiliation. But now he also felt something else, the power of truth. And that truth was closing in on Dalton Briggs faster than he could ever run. The video didn't fade from memory overnight. It grew louder, spreading from phones to news stations, from town gossip to national headlines. By the end of the week, Dalton Briggs's name was synonymous with disgrace. He had become the face of arrogance and cruelty, and there was no uniform polished enough to hide it. The police department convened a formal hearing. Dalton arrived in full dress blues, trying to project authority, but the weight of cameras and public outrage pressed against him like a vice. His fellow officers avoided his eyes, and the chief's expression was as sharp as a blade. The footage played on a projector for the committee. The sneer, the splash of water, the stunned silence. The room itself seemed to recoil. When the lights came back on, Dalton tried to justify himself. The kid was disrespectful. I was teaching him discipline. People don't understand what it's like wearing this badge. But the committee wasn't swayed. A senior board member leaned forward, her voice steady. No, Officer Briggs. What people understand is dignity. And you stripped a young man of his in front of an entire community. That is not service. That is abuse. With a unanimous vote, Dalton was stripped of his badge and dismissed from the force. The announcement hit the news within minutes. Officer fired after viral video of abuse. At Miller's Diner, a cheer went up when the headline appeared on the TV mounted over the counter. Eli happened to be working that shift, and for the first time in days, the weight in his chest lifted. Customers shook his hand, left bigger tips, and reminded him that his courage, even in silence, had mattered. Mr. Jennings, who had carried his own guilt for not standing up more forcefully, pulled Eli aside. You showed more strength than I did that day. I won't forget it, and this diner will always stand with you. The community followed through. A scholarship fund was started in Eli's name, donations pouring in from strangers who had seen the video and wanted to help a boy who had endured humiliation with grace. Eli's mother wept when she learned he might now afford the college education they had feared was out of reach. As for Dalton, he left the precinct that final day without applause, without ceremony, just the hollow echo of boots on tile. The same arrogance that had fueled his career had now burned it to ashes. For him, the badge was gone forever, and with it, the illusion of untouchable power. Weeks later, Eli sat in his favorite booth at the diner during a quiet shift, staring out the window as sunlight spilled across the street. He touched the scholarship acceptance letter tucked in his pocket and allowed himself a rare smile. He hadn't asked to be a symbol. He had only wanted to do his job. But in standing tall under humiliation, he had reminded an entire town and beyond of a simple truth. Respect is not earned by force. It is deserved by every human being. And that truth, once captured on camera, could never be poured out or silenced again.